Really quickly before we jump into the video, I completely forgot, and this is my own issue, but you're getting editing spooky here. I really wanted to give a big thank you out to my community who suggested this particular video. It was very interesting and kind of fun to dive into to look at everything in between, but I just wanted to send out a sincere and grateful thank you. And unfortunately, I couldn't find the comments, but I will remember for next time and I'll yank out the comments so I can put them all over here. But thank you so much for this suggestion, and I cannot wait for you guys to dive into this. So with all that being said, let's go to past spooky to talk about John Brennan Crutchley. All right, bye. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, hello, I'm Spooky, welcome. And today we're talking about John Brennan Crutchley. So he is also known as the Vampire R-word. I don't know if I'm gonna have to censor some of this stuff, so I'm probably gonna be a little careful. Yeah, he reigned between 1978 until he was caught in 1985. He is only known for one victim, but he supposedly has up to 30 victims. Now, normally I'm a little more like, hey, we need to be nice. You're gonna see me be a little more rude about him. He's dead. I'm gonna call him a coward. It just kind of is what it is. We're gonna go in kind of a sequence of timeline. So I'm gonna talk through and show each possible victim and where he was at during that timeline. And then we'll finally get to the one victim that got him caught and what happened afterwards. So all that being said, grab a blanket, grab a coffee, and let's dive on in to John Brennan Crutchley. In 1946, on October 1st, in Clarksburg, West Virginia, John Brennan Crutchley was born, and as the youngest of three. Unfortunately, the year prior, his eldest sister, Donna, passed away. And according to him, he was treated for the next 6 years as a girl because his mom was highly disappointed in him being a boy. He also reported to have severe abuse in the home, but no one is sure since it is just up to his claims. He later went on to grab a bachelor's in 1970 and then also a master's in engineering from the George Washington University. He worked as an electrical and computer systems engineer for several high-tech companies, and it kind of falls in to when these supposed murders or alleged murders happened. So in 1978, he was living in Fairfax County, Virginia, and he was working as an engineer in the Washington, D.C. technological sector. During that time, victim Deborah Rita Fitzjohn went missing on January 27th of 1978. She was 25 years old. She was a secretary. She also lived in Fairfax County, Virginia. The main connection to them is the fact that Deborah was Crutchley's girlfriend, and she was last seen leaving his trailer at a mobile home estate. Her body was later found in October of 1979, and she was discovered by a hunter in Virginia. The main suspicion about him doing it, not only because of him being the boyfriend, but also because years later when he was arrested, they found the lead detective's business card for Fitzjohn investigation still in his belongings. In 1982, Crutchley was still working in the Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia area and had access as well to the Norfolk Naval Air Station through defense contract work. Now, during this time and in 1983, there were two victims that they had a possible link to. The first one was Pamela Ann Kimbrough. She was 23 years old, and she went missing on March 25th of 1982. She was a Navy sailor, and she worked on Norfolk Naval Air Station in Virginia. She disappeared that night, and shortly after was found submerged in her car, tied up in the back seat. Another man was later convicted of her murder, but some still think to this day that she was a victim of Crutchley. In 83, he was still shifting between the DC, Virginia area down to Florida, but he was starting to make his move slowly into Florida. He eventually relocated to Brevard County, Florida, and he began working for the Harris Corporation in Palm Bay. One of the first victims of that year was Carol Ann Molnar. She was age 21.
She went missing February 6th of 1983, and she also was a Navy sailor who worked at the Norfolk Naval Air Station in Virginia. She was later found in May of 1983, submerged by a seawall and buried underneath rocks. Her cause of death was later determined to be strangulation, and her murder to this day still remains unsolved. Later on June 6th of 1983, Nancy K. Brown went missing. She was 25 years old, and the area that she went missing was the Cocoa Beach, Florida. She's originally from Illinois, and she was a tourist at that time. Her body was later found on March 8th of 1984, and they determined her cause of death to be blunt force trauma to her head. The reason why they believe this connection between her and Crutchley is mainly because her ID card was found in his belongings shortly after his arrest. There is a possible victim that no one has really linked or unlinked together, and this is of Tammy Lynn Lebert. She was 18 years old, and she went missing on July 6th of 1983 in Cocoa Beach, Florida. Her body has never been found, but she was a model and actress at the time who vanished after leaving a friend's house. In 1984, Crutchley then was living in Malabar, Florida, and he was working as a computer engineer again at the Harris Corporation. One of the first possible victims was of a 16-year-old named Cheryl Ann Windsor. She went missing on April 7th of 1984, and her body was later found on May 1st of 1984. And her body was later found in Merritt Island, Florida. Another victim is Deanna Lee Casey. She went missing on May 14th of 1984. She was age 20. She was heading to go make a phone call to her boyfriend, and she never made those phone calls and never returned back home. Her body was later found that year in Merritt, Florida as well. One of the last possible victims of that year is Kimberly Ann Walker. She was age 21, and she was last seen around June of 1984 in Florida near a convenience store. Witnesses do report seeing her enter a small light-colored car, and Crutchley at the time owned a light-colored Nissan. In 1985, Crutchley was still living in Malabar, Florida, and this is the year where we see a lot of the more clusters of deceased women around his home. 2 remains were discovered in January of 1985 near Route 1 in Malabar. The first one was Kimberly Ann Walker, and the second one would actually take almost 40 years to discover. Only in January of 2026, this year, was her remains finally matched to a DNA. Her name was Jeanette Marcotti. Her daughter volunteered her DNA, hoping to help find her mother. And thankfully, they were able to match her with someone. Unfortunately, the circumstances are sad, but at least one of the does has a name. One of the first victims of that year is Patti Lou. She was age 29, and she went missing on March 15th of 1985 in Mims, Florida. Her body has never been found, but her ID card was found in his desk at work. He later on said that he gave her a ride because she was hitchhiking earlier on in that year, but she left her ID behind supposedly when she got out of the car. Lynn K. DeSantis was age 40. She was last seen in November of 1985 in Melbourne, Florida. Her body was later found in a ditch in Grant, Florida on November 26th of 1985. One of the last possible victims is still unidentified. They are called the Brevard County Doe. They were found on December 15th of 1985 in West Melbourne Woods by some hunters. Now, their identity is unknown, and even their gender is technically unknown. As it's been reported, they're either biologically a male but a trans woman, or they are a woman. There have been conflicting reports due to just a multitude of different things. On some of the websites, it says female. On some of the websites, it just says biological male, presented as female. We aren't sure. The items that they had were necklaces with flowy tops and bottoms, as well as long hair. So some investigators believed it was a trans woman. Other investigators just believed it was a woman. I am not sure. I have not found any concrete evidence on either, but there are just a multitude of different things. I want to give the best possible option of finding out who they are. If I kind of just lay out that full thing and hope for the best. It's been well over 40 years, but we can only hope. On November 21st of 1985, a 19-year-old victim of the pseudonym Laura Murphy was picked up while hitchhiking. Crutchley took her back to his home and asked if she would like to go inside. When she refused, he strangled her with a ligature until she passed out, or then he drug her into the house and tied her up to a kitchen counter. Now, for over 22 hours, this poor woman was tortured, assaulted, and had needles poked into her arm to remove over 40% of her blood. When Crutchley had to leave for a quick errand, he handcuffed her in the tub, where she was able to crawl out a bathroom window and drag herself down the street until a motorist drove on by and stopped and helped her. She told him that this man at this specific house tortured her. He made note of the location before he drove her back to his house and called an ambulance for help and the police. When the police went back through the entire place on the first initial search, there were so many things. There were credit cards of unknown women, women's jewelry and hair that later went missing after the first search. There were ID cards, there were tapes, and the main tape was half erased, which is the one that showed Laura Murphy's abuse. There were also handcuffs and restraints, syringes and IV equipment, homemade sex tapes, videos, photos of women taken secretly in public, as well as a book titled The Dracula Syndrome. Now, in 1986, Crutchley did plead guilty to kidnapping, sexual battery with a deadly weapon, and multiple sexual assault charges, mainly to get away from the grievous bodily harm charge that prosecutions were going after. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison with 50 years of probation. Now, ironically though, Crutchley couldn't stay out of trouble. So in 1996, he was let go and transferred to a halfway home in Orlando, Florida, where the very next day he popped for marijuana. Now, in Florida, they have a 3 strikes law at the time, where that was technically his third strike, so he went back to jail for life in prison. Later, on March 30th of 2002, Crutchley was found in an apparent suicide with a bag wrapped around his head and asphyxiated to death. Later on, they renamed it to autoerotic asphyxiation and left it at that. Now, he is, in my eyes, a coward, but mainly because if you're going to be there for life in prison, you might as well fess up to the stuff you've done. During trial, he did state that he did up to 6 murders, but when prosecution kind of pushed back, he then didn't claim it anymore and kind of just became very quiet, and then later obviously admitted and pled guilty to the others. Now, there was one specific person, which was an FBI profile named Robert Ressler, who believed that Crutchley may have been responsible for multiple murders across several states, though again, none have ever been proven in court. And this is the main list of victims that we get is from him. He connected a lot of the dots of where Crutchley was working or living at the time and to the possible missing women, mainly because they believe that his suspected victims had a lot of similar traits, whether they were hitchhikers or traveling alone. A chunk of them disappeared in the county that he lived in Florida. Multiple victims were last seen entering a light-colored vehicle, and Crutchley owned a light-colored vehicle. Though we aren't fully sure if or how many victims Crutchley has, I do think he took the coward way out if it is suicide. And if someone else did it, then someone must have known something that we don't. So I did some digging into all of the victims. Most of them have a find a grave, so I will leave those down below if you would like to go check them out. There is only a few photos I did not find, obviously, of Laura Murphy, as that is a pseudonym. And I can only imagine wanting to go by one when you've dealt with something so tragic at only 19 years old. The other one was Carol Molnar, though she does finally have a find a grave that I've created for her. So if you would like to go check that out, please do so down below. The few who don't, I have connected their NamUs or their missing persons, so you can also check that out as well. This is a shorter case, which I was kind of glad to dig through, I guess is the right term. But it's just a very tragic one. Most of these are unsolved cases. There is one that was with that possible connection, but it's been solved, thankfully. And it's just a very sad moment to realize that if they are victims of this coward, then they will never have justice for them. A little bit of a heavy case, and I hope one day through something we're able to figure out who their killer was and give them some sort of justice. And I hope that the county doe is finally found out to be who they are, and I hope that Patti is finally reunited with her family. That being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Stay spooky, my friends.